KPBS On Demand is supported by Splatero, helping homeowners pay off debt by offering streamlined access to your home's equity with no additional monthly payments or new debt. Splatero provides a lump sum payment in exchange for a share of your home's future value. Pre-qualification is available at splatero.com.
Welcome back to another edition of the KPBS Cinema Junkie podcast. I'm Beth Accomando. This past weekend, I attended the 7th Annual Horrible Imaginings Film Festival. I've been working with festival founder Miguel Rodriguez since the festival started because we both share a passion for horror and the macabre. The festival was great, and I had the opportunity to speak with a number of filmmakers, as well as a number of horror writers. In fact, I got so many interviews and recorded so many panels that I'll be splitting my wrap-up about Horrible Imaginings Film Festival into 2 podcasts. This one focused on horror filmmakers, and another one airing the first week of October, featuring horror authors, as well as director Billy Hansen, who did a superb film adaptation of Stephen King's Survivor Type that played at Horrible Imaginings. So, for today's podcast, I'll be speaking with a handful of filmmakers about their craft and about expanding our expectations of the horror genre. I'll end with a wild discussion of Mexploitation cinema with the one and only Aaron Soto. First, in this roundup of the 7th Annual Horrible Imaginings Film Festival, I check in with Justin Denton in the lobby of the Museum of Photographic Arts. Justin debuted the final version of his film Burlap in both a traditional 2D version and supplemental virtual reality companion piece. All weekend, he had a booth set up where people could experience the VR world of his film. I spoke with Justin and with 2 people who saw his film in its 2D form and then tried the VR experience.
So we're at the Horrible Imaginings Film Festival here in San Diego, and I have a virtual reality experience called Burlap Reflections set up here in the foyer area, and then I also have a short film showing in the theater.
Tell me about your film Burlap. What is it about, and how does this VR portion of it kind of play into it?
Sure. So Burlap is a psychological horror film about a young, lonely serial killer who is attempting to put the pieces of his past back together in human form. And that's the kind of the traditional short film. And then the VR experience is a sister piece to that, where you get to experience what it's like firsthand to be in his basement.
Tell me your name and tell me what you're about to do here.
Carol Ann Flanagan, and I'm about to try virtual reality for the very first time.
All right, let's see what happens when you try it.
Okay.
This right here is the diopter. You'll adjust it till it's in focus for you. It adjusts the distance of the screen. Once you have that on, I'm going to hand you these headphones and you'll put those on, and then I'll have you stare at the square that says Burlap VR, and I'll tap the side of this for you, okay?
Okay.
So do you see a play button now, or?
It's working. It says
Okay.
dark corner.
Oh, there you go. You're in.
Whoa.
And don't forget you can look around.
Okay. Almost a... Whoa. Oh, God. This is not a happy story. Ah! Oh, my gosh.
Are you done?
Oh, my gosh.
So what was that like?
I'm speechless, which never happens. That is the most amazing experience. How it's so... Wow. That was quite amazing, especially the very, very end when you turn around and you get the reveal of the face. It felt... I'm glad it felt almost like getting a heart attack. It was so much. It was so real. It was so real. My God.
So you saw the film first and then did the VR experience. Did you feel that that was the best way to see it, or do you wish you saw it the reverse?
I'm glad I saw the film first because it was so good and so detailed. This to me was a little upsetting, possibly because it was my first time, possibly, but it was very off balance, and it was a whole new experience. It was a whole new experience. And the idea of figuring out that you could actually turn your head and see everything, it was almost science fiction. It was as much science fiction as it was reality for me.
My name is David Rains. I experienced being a severed head, I think, from the movie Burlap. A blinking severed head, which was really trippy. Yeah, I would say see the movie first, and then, because then you know what's going on, and then you understand that you're a severed head. And then when it's cool, actually. I've never done any VR like that before, which is why I had to sit down, because I was pretty sure that if I kept looking up and down that I was going to fall over.
Do you think this is a cool addition to the filmmaking process, to add this kind of element to a film?
I think it's inevitable that this is going to take the place of 3D. I don't see how it won't. If you're going to wear something on your face, it might as well be something that's a complete 360 sphere rather than staring at a flat screen. Yeah, I think it will be inevitably.
I heard something. Go back to bed. I heard something really bad.
So the actual film is slightly longer than the VR experience, and it's, I guess you would call it a traditional 2D version of the film, correct?
Right. Yeah, so Burlap, the traditional piece, is 11 and a half minutes long, and it's shot very much like a modern horror film. Kind of, for how short it is, it has a little bit of a slow burn feel to it, though, and that was something that I'm in love with, slow burn horrors. And I wanted to see if I could fit that into like a short form kind of a piece, and also some psychological elements. That's kind of the traditional piece, and then I wanted to see what of that I could carry over to the VR experience.
And how does the VR experience play into the film? If somebody's going to see your movie, do you recommend doing the VR experience first or the film first, or what's the order that you think is best?
Well, that's a tough one to answer. Right now, I guess I'm feeling like the VR experience first, just because VR in general gives you a much better sense of an experience of what it's like to be somewhere, but telling a story in VR is very different than telling a story in traditional media on a screen. So one of the things I wanted to do with the VR piece was give you enough to where you kind of understand what this killer is capable of and kind of the places that you'll go during the film, but not so much that you understand the entire storyline that happens in the traditional. I don't think I would call it a teaser for it, but it kind of sets you up for the mood that you should be in when you watch the film.
Now, for some people, they associate, I think, VR with kind of a gaming world. So how are filmmakers kind of using it that's different from that kind of experience?
Yeah, I think when a lot of people think of VR, they immediately think of video games, much like you said. But one of the things that I'm seeing quite a bit more is this 360 video or even pre-rendered computer graphics. Like last year, I created the Beware Crimson Peak piece that was a teaser for Crimson Peak itself. That was all CG, but it was pre-rendered, so it wasn't a video game experience. So when you're talking about kind of trying to do a narrative in the VR space, you're basically accepting as a viewer that they're taking over control of where you're going to go, when you're going to be there. We can edit, the film down for you and things like that, so we can make things happen at a very specific time. So as opposed to creating the story yourself while you're going through it, the story is being unfolded for you by a director.
I was just at the Scare LA convention a little while ago, and I have to say that compared to last year, this year there seemed to be dozens of VR booths, and I didn't get to go to all of them. Some of them seem to be related to haunt experiences, some of them seem to be for films or some sort of other non-gaming kind of entertainment. Has there been like a sudden kind of rise or boom in applying this VR technology in ways beyond gaming that's been different recently?
I mean, to me, it's been going on for a while. I work in virtual reality every day, so I don't notice it as much as I think the rest of the general audience would. But the main reason why I think you're starting to see a lot more of it is there's more headsets available. So with the advent of the Gear VR, which uses a phone, and now they're even handing those out, like when people do pre-orders for their phones, sometimes for free and things like that. So it's getting in more people's hands. And then we're about to see the PlayStation VR come out, which there's a ton of PlayStation 4s out right now. So we're going to see a whole lot of these PSVR VR headsets come out as well, which just means that there's a larger audience for it. So I think that's why we're starting to see more content. Specifically in the horror genre, I think the reason why you're seeing a lot more VR is that VR and horror just get along beautifully. It's an isolated experience just based on the way you put a headset on and you're shutting out the world, which already makes some people feel claustrophobia or some form of paranoia. And you have those two before you've even put any story together or any visuals or sounds or music. And so it really plays into the VR scope really well.
And how are you seeing this play out in the future for you? What kind of things are you imagining that this could do for you? Can you see an entire film just in a VR environment, or do you think it's always going to be kind of a component to something else?
I don't think that it has to be a component to something else. I mean, I've worked on pure VR experiences now as it is. And so I think in the scope of wanting to tell a bigger story, that it might, at least initially, be safer to break it up into smaller chunks. Think almost like episodic, like maybe it would be a 60-minute piece that you would break up into 10-minute digestible chunks that you could space out when they're released. That way you can kind of have a little bit of fun with it, almost like Stephen King novella style type thing like he did with The Green Mile, something like that, where you're just releasing small pieces of the story at a time and you're waiting for that next little mini episode to come out. We love binge watching things, so I think that gives us the opportunity to create the content in smaller pieces, which, to be honest, creating VR content takes a lot of time. So a 10-minute VR experience is going to take a good amount of time and willing a good amount of money, depending on who will pay for the content. But if we could do that, where you have these nice digestible chunks that would maybe each section would come out every month, then after 6 months or half a year, somebody could choose to watch it all at once if they want to. But some people only like having the headset on for a short period of time as well.
And what was the challenge for you in terms of shooting it in both formats? Did that add to a lot of your production time, or is that something that you can easily kind of work into the schedule?
I would say that actually depends more on your sets than anything else, because the whole thing with VR is that you can see everywhere. So if you can see in full 360 and you can turn all the way around, it depends on if you're shooting in a natural location that you don't have to build out that set in every place, then that will work out quite well for you. If it's an actual designed set and you haven't designed it with 4 walls and a ceiling in mind, it can be more difficult. Mine in particular, I had a 3-wall set, so I actually had to deal with, oh crap, they can see the 4th wall. What do I do about that? And I came up with some clever like plastic sheeting ideas and things like that. And luckily my ceiling already looked pretty good, so I was okay there. But you do actually run into some additional problems with lighting and things like that as well. Like, where do you put your lights? Because now you can see your lights. And those are things that we're so accustomed to, throwing up a bounce card or something like that so your actor's face looks better. But now you would see the bounce card, you would see the DP, you would see the director, you would see Video Village. Like, there's all of these new problems that come in where you now have to hide everything and get everybody out of the way and figure out how to still make the image look beautiful.
And how have people been reacting to it here? Because you've been running this for 2 days here at Horrible Imaginings, and people have recently had the chance to see the full-length short film and also experience the VR. So what kind of feedback or reactions are you getting?
The feedback's been really positive and interesting, and it's been fun to kind of hear. Some people think that actually, you know what? The thing that's been most interesting is people arguing whether they should have seen the VR first or the short film first. And I've heard a lot of people go back and forth on that. And it was funny that you asked me that question earlier, because some people are like, well, I wish I could have seen the VR first because then I wouldn't know as much about the killer and as much about the story. And other people are like, well, now that I know about the story, I'm happier being in the VR experience because now it told me more of what I needed to know. So it's kind of a funny like back and forth between them. I do think that as far as a VR experience, some people are naturally just scareder by putting that headset on, kind of because of the isolation, comment that I made earlier.
Well, it was interesting for me when I tried the VR experience, and my friend was doing it next to me, and just at a point where the killer was kind of like walking up towards the camera, my friend reached out and touched me, and I had this moment of like, wait a minute, it's not just visual. I think I jumped a little.
Yeah, what's fun is like VR, sure, it's a visual experience, but another thing that I do have in my experience is that really helps with kind of what you're talking about is I use spatial audio. So with spatial audio, when someone is to the left of you and they talk, you hear it clearly come out of the left ear. And it's not just the same thing as stereo, because with this, if I turn my head towards that person and I hear them, now they sound like they're in front of me. So it's kind of like stereo mixed with the ability to understand where your head has turned and change the orientation of the way that the speakers are working within the piece. That alone, mixed with the imagery, starts to make you feel like you're really there a little bit more. So then when someone goes and touches you, like what happened to you, you're liable to jump out of your skin a little bit.
Well, it seems like there's so many more things as a filmmaker that you have to take into account, because that notion of sound, and sound to me, especially in horror films, is so key to creating that experience.
Huge, yeah.
And it just seems like you are creating way more things that you have to be conscious of and paying attention to.
Oh yeah, basically everything that you used to rely on as tricks in film kind of go out the window, and now you have to reinvent how you deal with a lot of these different techniques. That being said, there are some that you get back. In a theater, if someone is watching something and it's too much for them and it's too scary or something like that, and they want to turn away, they can turn away and be looking at their friend or their loved one in the theater, and they know they're safe. In VR, you turn away, you're still in that room with the killer or whatever else is going on, and so for everything that I feel like is taken away from you as far as your known tools, you get another one back.
Well, it seems like, and again, this is because I saw a lot of these VR booths at Scare LA, which caters to a lot of haunts and people who like going to haunts and home haunters and things. And it just seems like there is also this potential for haunt situations where if you add some physical elements as well, like air coming at
Wind
you.
Machines, yeah. And honestly, I'm a part of. I'm sure maybe you saw the logo show up on the short film and the VR. Dark Corner. I created this piece with the assistance of Dark Corner Studios, which is a horror VR experience company. One of my friends, who is the owner of the company, Guy Shelmerdine, he created a piece called Catatonic, which you're actually put into a real wheelchair to experience the piece, and the wheelchair has what we call a butt kicker on it, and it does vibrate and move at certain times when things happen during that film. I won't spoil that for anybody who gets to experience it, but it definitely adds something. So when you add, the visuals plus the audio plus some type of a sensory element, your brain starts to buy into it. You're in a false situation because you physically put it on, but you hit a point where you do start to forget just a little bit, and it becomes a little bit scarier.
Are you a little bit sadistic in terms of the kind of things where your brain's going to what you can create for people?
Well, I would say we have a responsibility as filmmakers, but because this is horror, we have a responsibility to try to scare the piss out of you, and that's our point. So it's a great opportunity, I guess, is the best thing I could say, is in VR, because there aren't that many rules yet like you have in film where we know what works and what doesn't. We're always trying to do something new every time we create a new experience. And with that, with horror in particular, we want to find a new way to scare you that maybe you haven't seen before. And I think it's working out pretty well so far.
And how has this experience been for you here at Horrible Imaginings? Is this the first time you've been able to screen the short in 2 versions and interact with people, or have you done this before?
This actually is the first time I've done it in a festival, so this is its absolute festival premiere. I did show an earlier unfinished version of it at Monsterpalooza in Los Angeles in both forms, but it was a little bit more freeform. It wasn't as organized. Horrible Imaginings is very well organized. It's been very cool to be a part of it, but this is my first festival experience where somebody's walking directly out of the theater and then over to experience the VR. It's been great.
And do you feel you've learned anything from interacting with the audience?
Oh, absolutely. There's things that, I need to improve on as a filmmaker, as most of us do. But I think what I have learned is that maybe I could do even more with the VR part of it, to where it expands on the story in a fashion where either it answers questions that people may walk out from the film, or vice versa. Right now, they're more just sister pieces, as in they exist in the same universe, but you're not necessarily learning something entirely new about the killer or something like that. So I think I could give you just a little bit more information maybe, and I think other than that, just try to scare you more.
I think what would have been really interesting is to have 2 pieces of the VR where you see one before you go in,
Ooh.
And then one after you come out.
Bookend it. I think that's a great idea. So I would love it to actually be in a fashion where I could control it. Maybe that's, I think that might be the biggest thing. If I could make it to where you had to watch the VR to experience my short film, and then you had to see some other piece, because then I would know that I'm crafting something for you. Because I think that's been the bigger challenge with knowing that I have two pieces is like, okay, you're going to see one before the other. I may or may not be able to control when that happens. But if I had that absolute control as a storyteller, as a creator, I think that would be pretty fascinating.
Can you foresee a time when a theater venue could be equipped to do that, to like have it so like, okay, put on your VR, watch this thing, now you're going to watch the short, now you're going to watch something else?
That's a good question. I think it's kind of a tough one to answer. I don't think that they'll ever be equipped to do that for like everything that comes through, but we are hitting a point where now that you do have the option to, like, as a venue for an event, to rent a number of headsets and things like that. So I think with the proper number of volunteers or participants helping out make it happen, I think there's a way that you could do something like that. Another kind of shifted way you could do that is, as opposed to full VR, you could put these 360 experiences in a dome. So then they would have to walk through the dome experience to go into the theater. So then the kind of interesting thing about a dome experience as opposed to VR is you'd walk in and it's projected and you'd be able to turn and look, but you would also then be with whoever your companion might be for going into the film, or some of your friends or something like that. So maybe 4 of you could experience it at a time together, and then you would go into the theater. So that could be kind of cool.
Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much.
That was Justin Denton, who made the film Burlap, which screened in 2 versions at the Horrible Imaginings Film Festival. One was a traditional 2D version of the film, and the other a virtual reality experience. Horrible Imaginings Film Festival has a reputation for showcasing a fair amount of female filmmakers and femme-driven films, so it's only fair to make sure some women get their voices heard on this podcast. Izzy Lee directed Casey Lansdale in the short film Postpartum. Casey explains the basic premise of the film, or at least all you need to know. Then Izzy joins in on the conversation.
Well, the synopsis says not everyone is meant to be a mother, and so you can kind of make the leap that it's a horror festival. It's called Postpartum.
What? I haven't seen you in months. I tried to call, but your phone is disconnected.
Thanks, but I don't appreciate you banging down my door. The baby's sick.
The baby? You had the baby? Why didn't you tell anybody?
I tried.
Holly, what's wrong?
He stopped.
Who stopped? Holly, what happened? Oh, what's that smell?
I think you should leave. The baby's sick.
Holly, where's the baby?
Leave.
This is one of the small handful of films that was directed by a woman and focuses on a female character. So how do you feel women in horror are being represented these days? Do you think that there are enough women working in horror and enough of them getting to festivals?
I think festivals are still largely male. And I see this at every single festival that I go to. It's usually 9 white guys and 1 woman, if there's any women at all. And that's just how it is right now, and that's sad. And I think things are slowly changing, and I can't wait to continue seeing that happen live.
I feel like there are definitely more, specifically at this festival, more women that I have seen at a horror event than I've seen in a long time. I feel like Miguel, whether it's that he works extra hard to make it an inviting environment for women, or maybe it's just a place where women feel comfortable around him, or maybe it's just a place where there's more women in horror. It's hard to kind of tell, but I do think Horrible Imaginings is reaching a broader female base, and I think that the films that they're choosing are more female-based. They had the little girl who was the heroine of a very creepy film that I don't want to say too much about.
Little Boy Blue is the name. Yeah, it's amazing.
And you know, you just would not have seen that. And the victim was a little boy instead of what, you know, you always see the little girl is the one being traumatized. And not that either is good, but it's definitely an emphasis on making the female the heroine. There's more female directors that are feeling confident to put themselves in this environment because it is a male-dominated environment. So it has to be a place that feels welcoming, and I think Miguel definitely creates that environment here.
Absolutely. I mean, fuck yeah, Miguel. No, seriously. I have to agree 100% with that. I know Miguel from working on Viscera with him. So he was already in that position where he was looking out for lady filmmakers and, other points of view. I definitely think there's a part of that he's already there and looking specifically for us.
Right.
In terms of how you approach horror, do you feel that as a female filmmaker, do you want to do something that feels very specifically like it comes from a female filmmaker, or are you more interested in just making a film where somebody watching it can't tell?
Yes and no to both questions. I mean, I don't direct with any of my nether parts, so it's hard to to divorce that from any sort of reality. But when I did the film Innsmouth, I specifically wanted to have a nearly 100% female cast because it's something that you don't see hardly ever. And it was also kind of like a kick to Lovecraft being, tremendously, famously misogynist and, racist and all that. So it was kind of like a kick, and yet, I'm not like, hey, yeah, I dig Lovecraft, but yet I acknowledge that there's problematic aspects of, that author's personality. But I just want to make interesting stories, and I think that women bring a really different point of view when you look at what's been seen in mainstream cinema versus what we can create. And as a horror fan, just from that perspective, I really love seeing something different. I've been addicted to horror films and books and anything in culture I could get my hands on ever since I was a couple of years old. So it's just, it's always like, where's my next fix going to come from? And what can I get? What can I get? I want to try some new drugs, So
I don't know how to answer that question as because I'm not a filmmaker, but I look for.
And you're a writer, though, too.
As a writer and as an actress, you want to tell a good story, and I think that for me, I do kind of specifically err on the strong female side, and I kind of want you to know that there's a female back there kind of giving you the boot, and there's a little sick pleasure that I get from that. Because especially where I'm from East Texas, I'm from the South, and there's still a lot of oppression there for people of color, for females. I live in Los Angeles now, and so it's even more clear when I go back home just how far we do still have to go. So I really enjoy kind of that moment where I can go, yeah, a woman wrote this, and there's a kick-ass female protagonist, and I'm going to take parts that allow me to explore assets of a female part that you might not otherwise see. Like we talked a little earlier about postpartum. I mean, that's a very real thing that affects very real women, and people don't really talk about it because women aren't allowed to show feeling. Because if they show feeling, they're either crazy or, they're an emotional mess. So I think it's important to explore that in all aspects because everybody feels emotions. Everybody has different sort of reactions to that, and if it's based in a female viewpoint, then for me, all the better.
Well, it seems like you want to strive to get to the point of there's enough women making horror that you no longer get designated as, oh, you're a female horror filmmaker. You're
Right,
just
exactly.
a horror filmmaker.
that'd be nice. I hope to see that day. I hope I'm still alive.
Yeah, that's a long time coming. I think that I don't think that's going to be in even my lifetime because I think that there's such a feeling of women are dainty, women are soft, and you know what? There is something to it. There are a lot of soft and dainty women, but there's some soft and dainty men too.
Oh, sure.
And I think that rather than looking at that as a negative, which we all kind of do sometimes just inherently because that's our society, I think we just look at that as like, okay, that's a person who has these feelings instead of that's an effeminate man or an emotional woman. You just go, okay, that's a human. and they're having this experience.
Well, I got to interview Brett Marling, and I don't know if you're familiar with her work, but and one of the things she said that I thought really kind of hit it on the head is she said that she wants to be involved in films where it's a female character driving the plot. It doesn't matter if she's a positive role model, a negative role model, or anything else about it, but that it's the female character that needs to be moving it forward, not just following along or something.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, for how many years have we been used as plot devices?
I literally had the same conversation, and that's what I mean. Unfortunately, the interesting characteristic of a woman is that she was raped, beaten, abused. That there's something that was done to her, and I mean,
and then the man gets to take revenge and does the whole story,
and that's hard,
fucking crazy.
But you know,
or she gets kidnapped.
Unfortunately, that's all based in reality, though, and it's we've got to move away from that mindset, and it's kind of like a stereotype exists because a stereotype is a stereotype because there's moments of that, and I think that definitely there are some interesting characters that are created because those things happen, but that can't be all of us and all of our creation.
No.
And you don't want to lessen someone who's had that experience and became this person because of it, but that doesn't make that your story. That's just something that happened.
Right. Like I had tacos for dinner.
Right.
You know, who gives a shit?
I like tacos.
I like you.
I'm into tacos.
I love tacos.
I put mole on mine.
Me too. Me too. That was amazing.
So what do you love about horror? What keeps you working in the horror genre?
You can express things emotionally, politically. You can do a whole universe of stuff in horror that you can't do in other genres, man. You can do the worst, craziest, most fucked up shit. You can express, I mean, I got into filmmaking because I got really pissed off with what was going on in the world. And filmmaking was never something I set out to do. I was a writer, I was an artist, I was a film festival programmer, and a journalist. And I just wanted to explore and see if I could do it. So horror is just, besides having been addicted to it for, ever, you can do a whole lot of crazy stuff. And that's really fun. It's super fun.
I think for me, what I really like about horror is the stories are great, and I think that's a wonderful aspect of it. But I think the people in horror are the nicest people. And I think it's because they exercise their demons. And I think that the people who allow themselves to be so raw and so vulnerable and show their interest in a failed sort of system, in a failed world, that those are the people who are the most sensitive, the kindest, because they're able to kind of express all sides that a lot of people keep hidden. I mean, you don't really want people to know your dark side. And I feel like people in horror go, okay, this is just another facet of who I am. I mean, Izzy's a great example of that. She's into horror, but she's one of the nicest people that I know. I mean, sincerely. And you find a community of people who go, oh, I get it. And that's what everybody wants, is to feel like they're part of the group.
And where did the idea for Postpartum come from?
Well, my crazy little mind said, all right, I've met Casey Lansdale, and I think she's amazing, and I've seen her sing, so I know that she can act. Oh, I love you. And I wanted to give her a different kind of voice in another medium. I had seen our friend Chris Halleck had played Christmas with the Dead, and she had been given, no detriment to, the film or your dad's writing, but she had been given a very small role, and that was like a one-note angry wife role. And it makes me mad to see a one-dimensional female character because we're so much more than that, So I wanted to sort of showcase what I thought that she could do, and she pulled it off brilliantly. So the idea of the story itself was exploring that taboo postpartum depression, but I wanted to also make it even more than depression. I wanted to also give a little bit of psychosis in there, which, you see more than a little bit, I think.
You don't hear that?
Hear what?
The screaming. He never stops screaming.
It did start off as an absurdist horror comedy called Screaming Baby Ham.
I remember that. She sent me the first copy of the script. I was like,
Yeah, and we were gonna I was gonna carve a face into a piece of Spam or something, and have it actually screaming in the blanket. It's just gonna be super stupid and funny. And then I just started writing it. I'm like, you know what? This doesn't feel real. This feels really false. And it's stupid, and I don't like it. And then I just started writing something really dark. And I just gravitate towards madness, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, yeah, she really was very kind and said, I want to see what we can do in a medium that is completely different than what you do. I'm mainly a singer-songwriter. I write a little fiction, and I have been dabbling in the acting side, and I really enjoy it. So it was nice to kind of take something that was unfamiliar and to kind of make it my own, to allow myself to go to a place that I haven't as an artist. She's putting bruised makeup on my face and conditioner in my hair and make it look oily, and it's just, and it's so different than when I'm on stage for a performance. You want everything to be very proper, very pristine. You have a certain branding that you're going with, and it was a lot of fun for me to get to explore my darker side via postpartum.
I totally ruined your branding. I'm sorry.
It's okay. The Lansdale brand runs deep, so.
All right, well, I want to thank you both very much.
Thank you so much, Beth.
Thank you so much.
That was postpartum actress Casey Lansdale and director Izzy Lee. Next up are some cheery blokes from across the pond, director Phil Hayne and writer Mark Brown. They created the British doo-doo humor film Stained. It takes that horrific moment when you realize you're out of toilet paper and turns it into a darkly comic tale.
No. Good God. No.
Harris! Where are you going, Harris?
Oh, God. I'm sorry. I was just...
You aren't clean, Harris! You haven't wiped!
I know. But I'm going to clean it up. It's just... I've run out of paper.
You're very forgetful, Harris!
I am here at the Horrible Imaginings Film Festival. It's the 7th year. We are sitting in the catering room back here trying to find a quiet spot to chat. And you guys have come quite a ways to come for this festival.
Yeah, indeed. We've come from London, England to sunny San Diego to show our short film at Horrible Imaginings. It's our first time here, and it's absolutely brilliant. We had a lovely time.
I think he encapsulated everything there, but yeah, we've travelled a long way. It was first stop in New York, then San Diego. We're going to LA later today, so it's a lot of miles.
Your film that you're showing here was Stained, and when I was on the selection committee, and I remember getting a note saying like, "Oh, you need to watch this. It's classic British doo-doo humor."
Was that from Miguel, perchance? Yes, indeed. We've been told our film's very British, but then so are we, so that's all right. Yeah, it's something else.
The phrase British doo-doo humour is my favourite thing of this festival so far. It's that's a very American way of describing it, I would say, in fact. It is very British. It was kind of purposely so, I think, because it's that kind of standard sort of British sitcom situation of an exasperated human trying to get somewhere, and we take that to the extreme.
Excuse me. Is that all the toilet paper that you have?
Yep.
This is taking too long, Harris!
Looking for something special, like?
She knows, Harris! She can smell it on you.
She can't!
Can't what?
Special. Yes. I was looking for something a little more absorbent. Four-ply.
The good stuff.
Yes. The good stuff.
This isn't bloody Harrods, darling. What you see is what we got.
She toys with you! She knows!
What about kitchen towel?
You think they will wipe it all away like soap off a stove?
Got some of them wet wipes. If you're feeling fancy.
Yes.
Where?
Next to the bloody toilet paper. Where do you think?
Thank you.
The amusing thing is you're not the first British doo-doo humor film to screen at Horrible Imaginings. I think Miguel may have a thing for this, so I'm just saying.
We found his weak spot.
So now you know, people. Now you know how to get into this festival.
Your film was part of a horror comedy block. So talk about kind of this intersection of horror and comedy and what it is about that kind of works.
They're both about sort of payoff and delivery, I suppose. You set up a joke, you put a punchline, you set up a scare, and you deliver it. So I think there's a certain similarity with that. Why they mix so well together? I don't know. I think they offset each other. Two sides of the same coin, perhaps. There's a certain thing in the laugh, laughing at a joke and sort of screaming or jumping in a moment. They're both involuntary sort of physical reactions, so they're very similar in that way, although they sort of produce very different feelings. So I think they're two ingredients which can complement each other really well when it's done right.
Yeah, it's like, say, it's a tension and release thing. You crank up the pressure, lay it out at the end, and that's the same, like Phil says, it's the same with the scare, same with the joke. Often one can feed into the other. Now it's you can undercut the scares with a laugh, and then the scares have more impact, or the laugh has more impact. The more extreme you can push it. It's not something I think about when I'm writing or anything. No, it's just the way I write stuff. I can't take anything particularly seriously. So that's that.
Now, your film wouldn't be what I would conventionally call horror. So how do you feel about being included in a horror festival?
Oh, very happy. Horror, is a mega genre in itself and has many subgenres. Absolutely delighted. The film, when Mark and I were discussing about producing the film, festivals was certainly part of the consideration, because we've been to some great comedy festivals, we've been to some great horror festivals, and to be perfectly honest, we wanted to make a film that would be accessible to both of those genres. I think that they're easily two of the best genres in terms of the amount of festivals available to go to and to get into. And so, it was actually, we did something we don't normally do, which we actually thought tactically in business sense, instead of just like going, oh, that's great, we got to do that, and then running around with a camera. That's not strictly true, but but still, so that was it. It was a conscious decision to make a film that would be a comedy and a horror at the same time. So but Mark had already written the script, it was created, but that's why we wanted to do it, because we could get into both festivals.
Well, it's kind of all the stuff we've been doing kind of builds. We're trying to build up to, like, obviously doing a feature, and more than likely it's going to be a horror comedy, probably, because that's we've had reasonable success with it. So we're kind of trying to push more into that direction and see where it takes us. So I wouldn't say it wasn't. I didn't write the script consciously for festivals. I think I'd written it for a thing before that anyway. And I think it was when we were choosing what we were going to do that this one seemed like the sort of logical choice to kind of cover all our bases that we wanted to get covered.
One of the things that hooked me immediately on the film is you have these beautiful opening close-up shots of this man making tea. And so how did you decide that that's where you wanted to start it and that's how you wanted to shoot it?
As Mark's already alluded to, the original script was it was created for a different thing. It was created for a podcast, which is something Mark and some other producers and writers had a project called Tin Can Podcast, which was very successful, ran for a couple of years. And so we had we had this, and then obviously we had to adapt it for the screen. And the podcast kind of started off with the gentleman in his sort of compromising position. So, but I felt for the film it was important to. I think we developed the script when we were sort of adapting the idea and pushed on. And I really wanted to establish this character, and so I sat and I thought, well, we need to establish this character as, sort of as an obsessive compulsive, someone who has to be tidy, everything has to be done perfectly and exactly right, and when things go wrong and any kind of mess, any kind of dirt are incredibly upsetting for him. And so I sit there thinking, well, how are we going to do it in, really, you've got 30 seconds at the top to do it, max, maybe a little bit more. And so, that was the decision, to have him doing that just in a really sort of fiddly way. And then obviously when I started discussing it with my director of photography, we kind of thought, well, okay, how are we going to, do this? And we thought, well, we'll get close-ups, we'll get a montage. Our editor is absolutely fantastic, and he was able to piece it together. And I found the music that I liked, and I said, that's what we're going to use. And it was born.
Yeah, I think it's just about establishing the fastidiousness of the character. So when things do go wrong for him, you kind of understand why, and it's a high impact moment when you think, oh dear, if this is about to go tits up. So.
Well, there's the one shot of, I think it's when the biscuit falls into the teacup, and that phrase, tempest in a teacup, comes
storm in a teacup. Yeah, well, that was when, Mark, your first draft of adapting the script, that was something which you put in there, and it was like yes, that's perfect.
It's a visual metaphor, and sort of, it has similarities.
The plop.
Since we couldn't really show the act of, the next bit, the dirty bit, that was a kind of a sort of nice visual representation of what was about to happen.
Yeah.
Nice plopping sound.
You mentioned that there might be a feature in the future. So where are you going from here? What's kind of your next step after this film?
I'll hand you over to Mark, because he's just directed and written our company's first feature film, so it's currently quite deep into post-production, so I'll let him talk about that.
I just did a film that I wrote and directed called Guardians, and it stars 2 out of the 3 actors of Stained, and most of the other actors we've ever used, pretty much, calling in a lot of favours. So that's just we're just finishing the edits for that, and about to start on the sound and music and all that shenanigans. So hopefully that will be ready early next year, I think, is the plan, is the hope. Fingers crossed, and so yes, that'll be cool. It's a kind of a comedy thriller, so it may be here next year. We'll wait and see if Miguel likes it and if it's horror enough for him. So we'll see. But it's very similar humour to Stained.
Stained's done very well for us. We've had a lot of festivals with it in quite a short space of time, and some prestigious ones such as Horrible Imaginings as well. So we're very lucky with that. And so we wanted to try and develop it more. So we've come up with an idea we think works to take some of the ideas of Stained and develop it further into a horror film. Not necessarily with the same character, even the same scenario, but some of the core ideas. And it's going to be very silly and quite disgusting, and we figured if that's what's working for us at the moment, if it ain't broke, you don't fix it. Yeah. So
because we did try and think of like just an expansion of the idea of Stained, just try and get the characters and everything, but it is a short film, and it kind of it lends itself much more to a short film than a feature. So we kind of took the themes really, and what we liked and what we thought would work, and sort of all kind of fell into this weird, silly idea, and. Which I don't suppose we can really talk about yet, because it's not far enough down the line.
It's still brewing.
Are there any filmmakers or films that have influenced you in terms of your own filmmaking?
Yes, I think certainly. It sounds kind of weird. I mean, obviously I love watching movies. I watch movies as I go, but I don't consciously try and say, I want to make films like that guy or that lady or whoever. I try and sort of keep stuff. I think stuff seeps in almost by osmosis, and it influences you. The stuff that you love, you want to try and emulate that. But I don't ever do it consciously. I think I try and make stuff from my own head as much as possible. It's not about the pretension of striving to be an original voice. It's just I like to do things that way. I like things just to become naturally and flow like that. So I don't consciously reference any particular one, but obviously I have lots of favourite filmmakers and favourite movies. But
I was just wondering if there was a point at which you saw a film and you go like, I want to do that. Like, I want to make movies.
Oh yeah, yeah. As a kid, I have 3 brothers. As a kid, I used to get home and they always wanted to watch Transformers. So I wanted to watch it as well. But then they go out and play football, soccer, and I would stay inside and watch The General, the Buster Keaton movie, because I just absolutely loved it. So I guess that, and then there was another one. There was a film called Problem Child 2, which I was taken to see as kind of an 8 or a 9-year-old, and I came out of it and I was like, oh my God, I could do better than that. So I did have a go. Can't say I've done it yet.
Yeah, like Phil, I watch loads and loads of films, and I think the influences just come out by osmosis. They just kind of happen, and so it's never one specific thing. But yeah, I mean, the films that I grew up loving, the ones that made me get into films, was kind of a lot of fantasy stuff to begin with, like Wizard of Oz, Jason the Argonauts, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, that kind of stuff. And then, but I got into some very adult films at a very young age, like 6 or 7 years old, when I was watching like American Wealth in London and
Debbie Does Dallas.
Not Debbie Does Dallas. That's just poor quality. And quite a lot of horror stuff. And I'm surprised my mother let me listen to it, watch it actually, because she banned me from watching like Nightmare on Elm Street and RoboCop, but she would let me watch The Terminator and Mad Max and stuff like that. So
Nightmare on Elm Street was my first grown-up horror movie. Watched it when I was 9 or 10 at my mate Chris's house. It was that was a fantastic moment. It was like, oh, they really do this. It's brilliant. So yeah, very exciting. Yeah, wonderful first film to watch. Brilliant stuff.
I think John Landis has a lot to answer for my things, because of the comedies that he did and the horrors, both of like Trading Places and American Werewolf, like the two greatest films, and so I think they've been very influential on me, those, particularly in the horror comedy kind of combination, because American Werewolf is the perfect horror comedy. Yeah. It is the best.
All right. Well, I want to thank you two very much for coming all the way out here, and also for doing the interview.
All right. Thank you very much. It's we've had an amazing time. Can't say enough brilliant things about Horrible Imaginings and Miguel, who obviously organises it, and yourself and all the people who work so hard to make it happen. So we'd like to offer our sincere thanks. We've been treated wonderfully, had a great time. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll ditto that. It's been brilliant. It's been one of the best festivals we've been to, and we've been to a lot. So we will be back, definitely, if they'll have us.
That is a threat and a promise.
That was Phil Hayne and Mark Brown, the creators of Stained, and hopefully they will be back at Horrible Imaginings, but with a feature film next year. And finally, let's talk Mexploitation cinema. Aaron Soto is a Tijuana filmmaker whose work is inspired by the likes of Clive Barker and David Cronenberg, but also by a tradition of genre filmmaking in his own Mexico. These films are often referred to as Mexploitation cinema. Aaron had a panel on the topic at Horrible Imaginings, and then he took the time to speak with me about something he loves dearly. Aaron started his panel with a clip from the Mondo Macabre documentary about Mexploitation cinema.
Horror and fantasy films proliferated in Mexico in the mid-1950s, when the country's cinema industry was experiencing tough times. Combining elements of Mexico's indigenous folklore with European Catholic tradition, these films have a very special flavor. Their style draws on old horror classics, but adds a distinct touch of the macabre. In the 1930s and 40s, Mexican movies were exported all over the Spanish-speaking world. Their mixture of music and high drama, combined with a touch of the exotic, made many of them top box office hits. Their success laid the foundations for a small but highly creative film industry.
Mexican exploitation cinema. I know you guys are here at this moment because you know a little bit of Mexican exploitation. Maybe too much, maybe not too much. You know El Santo, right? Woo! Luchadores, Mexican wrestlers, right?
Enmascarados.
So, Los Enmascarados. It's very well known around the world that the Mexican exploitation cinema comes with luchadores, Mexican wrestlers with masks. La Llorona, that is an urban myth legend, that I think they made 3 movies, some of them in the Mexican Golden Age. And you might know El Vampiro, that is kind of like our version of Dracula. But there's a lot of stuff that happened in Mexican cinema that happened right after the El Santo films or the Luchadores films and between the 90s. Because in the 90s, we have one guy saying, I'm gonna make genre movies in Mexico and I'm gonna shot them beautifully and it's gonna be very poetic and very surreal, and the name of the guy is Guillermo del Toro. You know Guillermo del Toro? Yay. what I say is that between the 60s and the 90s, there was a big, big hole or emptiness in Mexican genre cinema. A lot of stuff that people don't know, a lot of stuff that people never seen, and a lot of stuff that even in Mexico wasn't that popular. So that's what we're gonna try to see today. We're gonna talk about movies. I'm gonna show you some pictures, maybe some posters, and we're gonna play clips because that's the whole point. We can talk, but we need to see some stuff, right? Hello. And I just want to say that all this stuff that I'm gonna play today, most of the stuff is very rare and very hard to find. So some of those clips that we're gonna see today are from transfers from old videotapes, from VHS to DVD. So don't worry about that. Maybe you see like a lot of color noise, maybe some pixels, but the whole point is to understand, to appreciate, and to realize that in Mexico between the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we do have exploitation movies. So, are you ready to start? Yeah. Hello, are you ready for Mexploitation?
That was Aaron introducing his panel at Horrible Imaginings. Now for my interview with him. I am here at Horrible Imaginings Film Festival. It's 7th year, and I have finally tracked down Aaron Soto so that I can get an interview with him. And I met Aaron when he was at Southwestern College making student films, and I had the great privilege and honor of showing one of your first films, Omega Shell. So we go back a little ways.
Yes, in fact, what I always say, and I'm going to say it right now, I started my career with you. Actually, you started my career. You were the one person who told me, you're doing something special, let me play it. And I say, oh, no, I can't believe somebody like this. And I guess you like it. You play it on the MOPA, and the Museum of Photography and Arts in San Diego. And I was surprised and in shock that it was a big success with the audience. And I didn't even expect it. I didn't even knew how to react or how to talk. I was in shock. But that day is still with me all my life. For me, that's the day that I realized that I could do something in film. And that's all thanks to you, Beth. So when I was coming this year to the festival, it was very emotional to me because this is where everything starts, and it starts with you. So yes, I'm really emotional about it.
Well, it doesn't start with me. It starts with you because you are phenomenally talented. The film he did, Omega Shell, when I saw it, and I heard you made it for like $200 and shot it on videotape, and the production design was amazing, the story was amazing, there were images in there that were so strong, it was just brilliant.
I made a movie for me, and I never realized, living in Tijuana, that I could really be a filmmaker. In Mexico back then was really hard to be a genre filmmaker, and was really hard to be a filmmaker. So when I come to the US and meet somebody like you, that's when I start thinking that maybe my voice could find the audience going outside of Mexico. And that's what happened with Omega Shell. You put it on the map, and then everybody starts talking about it, then other festivals starting to play it. And then one day I met Guillermo del Toro, and he said, oh yeah, I saw Omega Shell. And it was surreal. But it was thanks to one people who believe, and that was you, Beth. I still can't believe it because yes, it was a $200 short film that kind of changed my life.
Well, tonight at the Museum of Photographic Arts for Miguel Rodriguez's festival, Horrible Imaginings, you had a panel on Mexploitation cinema, and this is part of what influenced you in terms of the kind of film that you eventually would make. So what was the idea behind doing this panel?
For many years, there were like a group of filmmakers and many film titles that impact my life in Mexico. Of course, I grew up watching David Cronenberg movies and David Lynch and Dario Argento and all those guys. But we kind of have our own version of Dario Argento in Mexico, or we kind of have our own version of Abel Ferrara, kind of like rape revenge movies or kind of like giallo films. But the only movies, Mexican movies, genre Mexican movies that people knew outside of Mexico were Santo films or Dracula films, but not these subgenres from the 70s and 80s. So for me, it was very important to starting to cultivate the audience who come and watch my movies so they can look to Mexican cinema, to all these forgotten filmmakers and forgotten stars. And this wasn't planned for me, like I'm gonna become this guy who's gonna talk about Mexploitation for 10 years. But then people started to ask me to do like master classes and panels in Mexico, then in Canada. Then I turn around and I say, I'm starting to be like the only guy talking about this outside of the country. You know, there's a couple of books and there's people who talk about this, but not in a deep way. So for me, to Miguel, to call me and say, you know what, I think it's time to put Mexican genre cinema on the map. Everybody knows Guillermo del Toro, everybody knows El Santo, but Miguel say, but we need people to know Lin May, to know Fernando Almada, to know all these people who made it even greater. And I say, let's do something. I say to Miguel, I will be glad. This is probably the best thing you ever asked to me. So we did it. We did it.
What do you remember of seeing these films when you were younger? What kind of an impact did they make on you?
It was really bizarre and surreal because it wasn't like in America that they in the 80s or late 70s they tell you this is Charles Bronson, this is a vigilante film, or this is Mel Gibson, George Miller, this is a post-apocalyptic movie, Mad Max. It wasn't like that. It was like, come and watch this Mexican movie. You didn't even know it was a genre, subgenre. You didn't even nothing. Then you see this Mexican sheriff in Texas, okay? Mexican sheriff in Texas, speaking Spanish, of course, and fighting these 12 bikers who happen to be punks, but to happen to be punks that looks like Mad Max Part 2. And they started to rob and rape people and stuff. And then the sheriff say, okay, I'm gonna fight these punks, but I'm not gonna use my gun. I'm gonna use my whip. And of course, that was going to another universe. And they wouldn't talk to you about the genre. They wouldn't tell you this is sci-fi or this is post-apocalyptic. Probably they wanted you to feel like this is the present day. I don't know. But it was an experience as surreal as the movies. And I guess that's kind of like a reflection of the country that, and to the tradition of magic realism, that to watch the movies, it wasn't only a movie, it was also an experience. So for me, as a child, it was shocking. It was more shocking to watch this type of movies than El Santo films. El Santo was a regular wrestler that you can pay and see fighting, and then you can pay and see in the movies. But these other guys, you never knew nothing about it. So when you see a movie like a Texas sheriff fighting punks in bikes, of course that's something that you never ever forget your whole life.
So when you first saw some of these Mexploitation films, were you at that point seeing them and thinking like, this is something that I want to do, or were you just watching them as an audience member and just engaged by what they were saying?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Something happened in Mexico between the 60s and the 90s that were genre films. They weren't like really well shot. It wasn't like the best filmmakers or like beautiful visuals. Some of them were really beautiful images, but most of them were really low budget, cheap, and shot really fast. It was really similar to the Roger Corman 70s films, or really similar to the Grindhouse, the New York Grindhouse movies of the late 70s and 80s. So when people like Guillermo del Toro started making movies in the 90s, everything was beautiful. You know, the images were beautiful, the movies were very well shot. So when you watch Mexican exploitation movie, when I watched them, I didn't want to make that type of movie. I never even think about it. After I saw stuff from Guillermo del Toro or Alfonso Cuarón when they were living in Mexico and doing movies in Mexican movies, because what they did is show me that we could have good technicians and good photographers and good musicians in movies. So I started to realize that the guys who did movies before them, they didn't have the best budget. They didn't have probably the best technicians, but they have awesome ideas too. So that's when I started to try to be like them. But at the beginning, no. At the beginning, it was more as an entertainment, and I mean at the same time I could watch something like Basket Case or like Miss 45, and at the same time I can watch something like Tintorera or something like from Italy, like Zombie from Lucio Fulci. So for me, everything was exploitation and to entertain. But now that I look back, I say, oh my God, I can't believe how many great ideas and awesome movies and heroes that we need to bring back.
And what is it about exploitation cinema that appeals to you? Because there are Mexican art house films, there are dramas, there's a lot of different kind of films that are being made there, but you seem to really be drawn to horror and exploitation.
What I like is the honesty and that they really talk to you. One thing that we miss right now in Mexican cinema, I hope we can bring that back, is movies that people can relate to. Like when you mention like Mexican art house films, like I remember early 90s, like movies like Water for Chocolate. And even El Mariachi was kind of like an art house movie, action art house movie, whatever. No one could relate to those movies. Those movies are amazing, and I love them. But it wasn't like something that come from the core of the Mexicans. So I think this type of movies, exploitation movies, really talk about a reality of life. Everybody say that those are absurd movies or are extreme movies, but life is absurd. Life is extreme. And sometimes there's stuff that we don't understand. And it's better if we don't understand the stuff. And it's okay to have kind of like abstract emotions, you know? And I really glorify that. That's probably the thing that I like more about being a filmmaker, that I can do stuff without trying to give you an answer. Because I think life is confusing, you know? I think what I'm saying is that I like the subconscious a lot. And that's what I like Lynch and Cronenberg. Of course, I don't mean that just as a way to excuse exploitation or to excuse something that it can be like really ridiculous. But I think there's a charm and there's a big fascination with the things that we don't understand. And believe me, I don't want to understand. I like the enigma.
Well, also, do you think that genre films like that, especially something like horror, I mean, it's almost in a universal language where you don't necessarily even have to translate a lot of it because so much of it is visual or through audio and music that it really just kind of gets you on a very gut level that you get a reaction?
Yeah, I think what horror movies do, at least to me, is to show me that life is not that simple. And sometimes we don't like to think about it. But even though horror movies are supposed to be like these things with graphic violence and blood and gore or like crazy horror or scary, I think there's a quality of fascination that we really like sex, you know. And I'm not comparing horror movies with an orgasm, but what I'm saying is that it's very attractive, and maybe we don't know why. You know, a lot of people think it can be like very infantile. That's how you say infantile, like movies, obvious films for teens. But I think that's not the case. I mean, you can say that of Hollywood films, of summer films, you know, but horror, like real horror movies from real authors, they have more to say about life than anything else. And yes, I love violence in movies and I love graphic images, but I like to when filmmakers say something about themselves, even if we don't even know them, or maybe they don't know they're saying something about themselves. And I guess that's the way I approach horror. Like every time I write a story or I shot a film, I'm saying something about my life, the way I grew up, or what I used to do when I was a kid, something.
You started your discussion for your presentation with Alucard. Talk a little bit about that film and why it's important and why it's specifically important to you.
There is something, a secret behind these surreal filmmakers from the 60s and 70s. And I think Alucarda, in a way, fascinates me as just like a Jodorowsky film or like a Luis Buñuel film. There is something that related to religion and sex. And in Alucarda, and to blood, because it's a vampire film. Being grown up in Mexico, that is a very, very religious country and very macho country. Religious and sex doesn't mix, and religious and sex and blood doesn't mix either. So what Alucarda did to me is to show me that, in a way, religion and sex can culminate together through this thing that they teach us since we were a kid, like to fear sex, to fear God, to fear this and that. So Alucarda represents that to me, and for me it's kind of like I see that movie like in a cathartic way, and it's a movie that every time I finish to watch a movie, I feel like I participate in a ritual. I didn't saw a movie when I was a kid. I think I saw it the first time when I was maybe 21 years old. So I was already a man. I already knew about religion and the taboos and sex and stuff. But I think if I talk about in a simple way about the movie, I think it's a very, very bizarre, disturbing, sexy Mexploitation film. And I think this actress, Tina Romero, she did an amazing job as Alucarda, and she really, really was brave to do all the stuff that she did in the movie. I mean, if you look back at the history of Mexican cinema, I think there's no other actress that's done that. Not even Alejandro Jodorowsky actress. Jodorowsky, he really pushed his actors. But in this movie, Tina Romero, she is over the top.
Well, and also that film brings up a particular aspect of Mexican horror, which is Catholicism plays a big part in these horror films.
Yeah, I never forget the first question that you asked me about Omega Shed, and it was about religion, because I have crosses in the desert. And back then, I was so shy and I was still in my shell. So I wasn't ready to talk about why I put crosses or why I have this kind of like a religious reference in the short. But now that I think back, almost every great piece of art in Mexico, almost every piece of art, or almost every great piece of art, or every great artist in Mexico deals with a conflict with religion and Catholicism. Even, Luis Buñuel, he wasn't Mexican, but he came to Mexico. Then he started doing all these movies about Catholicism, and he even played a priest in one of his movies. It's really clear, that we've been so affected by these religious groups over there. There's so much pressure about living the life between the mundane and this spiritual world. Mexico is a country where there's a day called El Día de la Virgen de Guadalupe. That means the day of the Virgin of Guadalupe. And what is crazy about that day, you say, okay, Aaron, yeah, whatever, what is that? Well, that day, no one goes to school, no one goes to work, the whole country stops, and there's this big parade with millions of people carrying a statue of the Guadalupe Virgin. So it's very, very hard to believe that these days that still happen, you know. So when you're trying to be a free thinker and try to be intellectual in a country like that, you're always going to have a little bit of religious guilt.
Well, and the thing too is it's Catholicism, but it's not exactly the same as like in Europe or in America. In American churches, if you go in and you see Christ on the cross, it's this very kind of clean, you know, there's not blood usually, and he doesn't look like he's in pain on the cross. It's very different if you go into most Mexican churches.
Yes, in Mexico, even though religion fanatics probably denied it, they're gonna deny this. But the whole process of a religion parade or a religion ceremony or a religion ritual is very sexual. And there's this thing about people letting themselves to be controlled by this one guy who has this special custom, and at the same time, they wanna represent all this imaginary of idols and gods in real life. So when there's these special events and special days about religions, celebrations about religion figures, people get naked. They paint themselves with blood, and they like to kind of like beat themselves up in a very sadomasochistic or sadist. I don't know what's the difference between both kind of way. That goes back to Alucarda. When you see that movie, you almost can smell the fanatism at the same time that you smelling the blood and the sex. That I think is kind of part of the same thing, like a big frustration that clash with faith. I don't know if I'm making sense, but I'm trying to think about it. And when I see all these religion parades or celebrations on the streets, you feel like these people are really looking at this as if they are searching for an orgasm. It's that kind of emotion because it's raw and it's raw and brutal at the same time, and at the same time is absurd.
And I also think that, you know, this emphasis on kind of the pain and the physicality of what Christ went through is horrific, which I think also plays into kind of the kind of imagery you get in some of the films, and also that kind of visceral horror that comes out sometimes.
Yeah, like you don't see people like who believe in this type of things. You don't see people trying to have this beautiful image of God, of Christ. The image they choose to see is the naked Christ in a cross with blood, and they cried about it, and they pray about it, and they are emotional about it. Yes, I think everything goes back to human nature, you know. But of course, they're never gonna call it human nature. They're gonna call it like spiritual something, you know. But I think what Mexploitation movies do, to have all these nuns doing this kinky stuff. Most of the Mexploitation, not all, but most of them, you know, the Devils, Satanic Pandemonium, all those movies. What they do, I think they really show what the feeling and emotions and mental state of most of the nuns. You know, there is a way to tell to your body, don't be a body. You know, it doesn't make any sense. You know, that's why it's so horrific, because they are really suppressing these feelings, and at the same time, any other kind of feeling that they felt, they see those feelings as the devil. You know, so in the other hand, I like it because it strikes the imagination of people. You know, I like the whole Mexican imaginary about Day of the Dead and all the stuff. I mean, if we didn't have religion in Mexico, we probably wouldn't have the Day of the Dead festivities. So one thing that is really crazy and insane and hard to believe, it can strike something beautiful, like beautiful tales and beautiful traditions and poetic images. Day of the Dead, I think, is a very poetic and beautiful celebration to see. I don't believe in that celebration, but I like the fantasy and the whole Walt Disney scenario of skeletons walking and stuff.
One of the other things you brought up during your panel were all these women, and I forgot the name of what that particular category of Mexploitation is, but all these women.
Vedettes. Las vedettes.
So tell me about what they were, and you talked about how they kind of saved the industry.
Yes, it was really funny because there was this big nightclub scene in Mexico during the 60s and 70s where they have these shows like in Vegas, So they hired this beautiful woman who happened to have talent to sing and dance and to dress up really exotic. And it became like probably the biggest thing to do over the weekend. This is on the center of the country, like in the main capital of the country, Mexico City, to go to a nightclub and watch a real performance doing something amazing with clothing and singing and dancing, and at the same time is a beautiful lady. So that something happened, something magic happened. A film producer say, oh my God, look all these beautiful ladies doing these variety shows in nightclubs. Why don't we hire them and put them in movies? Because they already had the talent. They were even doing acting sketches on the nightclubs. So they hired this woman to do these new type of movies, like sexy movies. Like it wasn't erotic and it wasn't porn. It was comedies with a little bit of skin.
It's a little bit like our burlesque show kind of thing. A little?
Yeah, it was burlesque, totally burlesque. At the same time, they weren't sexploitation films because we didn't see any sex in those movies. But what it was great about these movies is that somebody created a story about this girl being ficheras. And ficheras is a word that comes from the word fisha. And fisha is one of those plastic coins that guys give to women to dance in special bars or special places. I don't know how do you call those plastic coins, but this woman take the coins and then exchange them for money. So the name of the coin is fichas. So ficheras, is fisha female, because in Mexico, all the objects are male or female. I know it's hard to explain, like a puerta is female, and a puerta is door, is female, and carro is car, that's male. Well, that's another thing. So they create these fichera stories, and it became like the biggest success ever in Mexican cinema. So they started to make sequels, then they started to make more movies about ficheras, and they started to hire all these vedettes from the nightclubs. So then these vedettes became known as ficheras. And somebody else say these are comedies with sex. So they started to call the movies sexy comedies. So this is almost the same genre, sexy comedias and ficheras. The only difference is that sexy comedias, it can be a story about anything. And ficheras is only a story about these girls who get these coins to dance with guys. But it became a subgenre, and very important subgenre, and it saved the industry. Like the industry was going down, then all these producers became rich, then all these vedettes became superstars, and people like the president of Mexico started to date them. All the politics, I'm serious. Like they never date a regular guy. They only date politics. How do you say politics, man? Politicians. It was really crazy because the president, López Portillo, in the 80s, early 80s, he said to the most successful vedette, Sacha Montenegro, that she did like 100 movies, and she was so beautiful. So the president said, you know what? I ordered you to marry me. I'm the president. And she married the president. And this is a true story. I'm not lying. I'm not lying. So it was that big. It was that big. They were the most desirable women in Mexico. But what people forget is that, of course, they were sex symbols, but what people forget is that they were more than that. They were really hard workers. They were really talented. They were really doing dance and singing as we see them in the movies, that they were doing the same thing on nightclubs. You can say now, oh, that's easy to do, but it's not easy to do. And even back then in Mexico, that was something that a woman shouldn't do, and they didn't care. So what happened with them is that they started to change the way we perceive and we see women in Mexico, you know? And one thing that happens that we didn't talk about during the panel, that I wish I could talk about it, is that when the government realized that these movies were affecting the audience, they say, okay, we need to produce these movies. We need to give these guys money or like a grant so they can make these movies, because we wanna this could work for some of our projects. There was a big project that the government was doing in the 70s, and that was the planification of the family. In Mexico, people didn't know nothing about birth control, you know? So that's why you see all these Mexican families of 20 people, no? Like, oh, this is my brother's 20 brothers, you know? That's like a cliche and a joke, but it's true. I have 8 brothers and sisters. I have 5 sisters and 3 brothers. My mom was having children almost every year, you know? Mm-hmm. And that was her job, because my dad didn't care. So the government say, we need to stop people having children because we overpopulating. That's how you say it, right? Mm-hmm. I say, but these people, we say to these people that they need to protect themselves, or to use the birth control pill, or to go to have surgery or something. They're going to say this is going against religion. But because, of course, religion was against that. Mm-hmm. So the way to liberate the minds of the Mexicans, the government started to support these sexual comedies, these fichera movies. And this is true story. This is true story. So they started to produce them. And then they throw the big plan, the birth control plan to Mexican, and it works. And it worked. You know, no one say nothing, because the people started to liberate themselves, you know? And this is true story. I'm not lying. I'm not making this up. This really happened. So in many ways, this type of movies and this type of performance and this type of producers and filmmakers really did something and really connect with the real audience, the real Mexicans. And that's something that you never seen before. You know, you see in the Mexican golden age of cinema, like legends like Maria Felix, Pedro Infante, Dolores del Rio, Cantinflas, the comedian, and they never connect with something real. They were superstars, mm-hmm. you know. But on the 70s and 80s, this was people like you. And that was a big difference, you know, with these kind of movies.
And at the panel, you called these women brave mm-hmm. for what they did.
See, I think these Mexploitation queens are probably the bravest girls ever in the history of Mexico. What they did in that time, they really needed lots of guts to do that. They changed the way to view the way a woman dressed in Mexico. Mexico was a country where you couldn't wear a mini skirt. You know, you couldn't. And then people started to wear mini skirts. You know, and it was very important, because most of mothers were married just to be in the kitchen and take care of kids. You know, they could never have fun. They could never do something outside of the house. They can never choose what to do, what to wear. And these was the Mexican way of living for so many years. So when vedettes like La Princesa Leia or Lin May is starting to see, look at my body, I don't care if you think I'm fat, I don't care if you think I have a big butt or whatever, but I'm doing it and I'm dancing, I'm having fun. This divided a little bit the perception of women and women in general. They're starting to say, okay, why do I have to do all the things that the men say to me? You know, in Mexico, Mexican men were like the machos men ever, you know, like really macho, like I come back from work and you're gonna have my food warm. I don't care. You know, I don't care if you're tired. You know, you wanna have sex with me? I don't care. So that was so sad. Órale, Miguel.
And Miguel is walking through his festival right now.
Yes. And of course,
doing things that a festival director probably shouldn't.
Exactly.
Oh, there's the generator. Do you need help?
But that's the secret of this festival, that he's working a lot. And I think these women say, you know what, I don't care what you say, I don't care what you're trying to make me do, I want to work, I want to make my own money, I want to think by myself, and I want to choose what I want to do with my life. And it was really sad when the same government say, okay, now we don't want them because they have too much power. Now we need to call them whores. And that happens. They started to say that these girls were prostitutes and stuff like that. And a lot of people believe it. And they became afraid and ashamed. And that sucks because they are lions. What they did was very important. And I think some of them are still alive, and I think they deserve to have recognition while they are alive.
For a lot of Americans, they are not going to be familiar with a lot. Most Americans probably know El Santo or those Mexican wrestling films. For people who are unfamiliar with this, can you give us like a few titles or a few filmmakers, something that they could seek out that maybe isn't impossible to find so that they can start getting a flavor for this?
Yes, I'm going to say some titles that you can get on YouTube. That's great. There's Las Ficheras. That's the first Ficheras movie. It's on YouTube. Stars Sacha Montenegro and Jorge Rivero. And it's a classic and legendary film. And it's a very important film because how many times you can say somebody created a subgenre? The movie created a subgenre, and it's a very important subgenre. And another movie that is on YouTube is Intrepidus Punks. This is probably the craziest punk film ever made. It has already a big cult following all over the world, and it stars the vedette Princesa Leia. She is strong. She kick ass in that movie, and she looks awesome as a punk. Probably the best stuff of that movie is the costumes, the costume designs. I think is a costume design for an Oscar. It's amazing. Every detail in the costume designs of Intrepidus Punks are amazing, and I think it's one of the best, probably the best grindhouse films in the history of Mexican cinema. If that movie will be in English, it will be like a grindhouse classic, definitely. Probably another one is definitely Siete en la Mira with the Almada brothers, and you can watch that on YouTube too. That's another punk film. And the important thing about La Siete en la Mira is that it stars Fernando Almada and Mario Almada, that are kind of like the Charlie Bronsons of Mexico. Chuck Norris and Charles Bronson from Mexico are two brothers, and they were the two most successful actors in the Mexploitation era, and between 70s and 80s. Everything they do became gold. They are like the Tom Cruise of Mexico in the 80s. They were the box office success. They were phenomenal, and they weren't probably the best actors, but they were so charismatic. And at the beginning of their career, they really tried to do subgenres in Mexico, like they did giallo films from Italy.
The Italian.
They made a great giallo film. They made revenge movies, and they make a lot of stuff that you can recognize, like from the New York filmmakers or from Italian filmmakers. They make westerns, great westerns. And of course, over the years, they started to make more shitty movies. But probably the late 70s and early 80s, they made awesome stuff, action movies, like crazy action movies, and they are responsible for the subgenre of narco cinema. You know, they made a lot of movies about these narcos that are heroes in Mexican culture. No, you know, I'm watching right now the Pablo Escobar series. I don't know what's the name, Sicario, I think so, in Netflix. And when I was watching it, and I say, okay, yeah, this looks like a mix of Goodfellas with Mario Almada, you know. And I think those are great recommendations.
You currently are working with Rue Morgue in Mexico?
See, yes, I have the honor to coordinate the Rue Morgue Mexico section, and I do this online. But what I like more about doing that is that I can connect some stuff from Mexico to Canada. So 2 months ago, we went to the Dark Carnival Festival of Rue Morgue, and we do a Mexploitation panel, and we talk about all of this. And when I was talking about all of this over there, I was thinking like this is insane. Like I'm in Rue Morgue, Dark Carnival Festival in Canada, talking about these exploitation movies from Mexico that no one knew, no one talked about. So that's what I like about being with Rue Morgue. That Rue Morgue is a magazine who really believe in different cultures, and that at the same time they put the mainstream and the independent on the same level. I really feel really lucky and honored to be part of that. And well, in the other hand, I was with Rue Morgue at the beginning, so I guess in a way I try to think like I deserve this. But I think it's really special because I never imagined represent anything. I grew up reading famous monsters of Filmland and magazine and Cine Fantastic magazine and of course Fangoria magazine. I never think about being part of that. That was part of my life, and I was a big fan, and those magazines changed my life. So when I started reading Rue Morgue, it was like finally there's a publication who's bringing horror back, and I never think about something else. So now that I represent Rue Morgue in Mexico, or I'm representing right now Mexploitation Cinema, I feel a little bit responsible, you know? But I don't like to think about it because for me, I'm doing this for fun because I like it, and it really means so much to me.
And does this leave you any time to make films of your own?
Oh yeah, yes. The point for me is to make Ratas del Bordo, Border Rats, my new feature to shot this year, produced by Pablo Absento. You know Pablo Absento, see? She's co-producing the movie. The reason I can make Ratas del Bordo right now, because that's an idea that I have for years, is because the success of Mexico Barbaro, and that was an unexpected success. But I'm really grateful to be part of that because there's a movie made by 8 independent filmmakers. The 8 filmmakers produced the movie. We didn't have a grant. We didn't have a support from the government. We didn't have support from any institution. Nothing. This is a movie that we made from our pockets. And we didn't even have like a support at the beginning from the official film media in Mexico, film institution, like, oh, at least these guys are doing this, let's talk about this. Nothing like that, you know? And it became like probably one of the biggest indie hits from Mexico. You know, it's not a movie that was nominated for an Oscar, or it's not a movie like the movies that represent Mexico, like in international festivals like Berlin or Cannes. But if he found an audience on the horror genre outside Mexico, of course, Canada and Japan and of course the U.S. And I think that was, for us, it was great, and I think it was because we really did it from the heart. So even if the movie is not for everybody, or probably is not the best movie you've ever seen, I think the genre fans and the genre circuit, international circuit, they recognize the heart in the movie, so they support the movie. So it got distribution all around the world. It won some awards. We got selected in Cannes last year, and it was like, what's going on here? Why? And it really pushed the career of new filmmakers. You know, I've been doing shorts and stuff in Mexico for years, so in a way, I'm a little bit known in the whole country because of that. But there was like half of the filmmakers in Mexico, Barbaro, they were new filmmakers. So now they are well known. So I think it did so many different stuff in so many ways. It put a Mexican horror film on the map, and then international map. It helped new filmmakers in Mexico, and at the same time, it really changed the way we do business as independent filmmakers. And I think everybody else who's doing horror right now in Mexico is going to start copying the way we work with Mexico Barbaro, you know, because now they realize they don't need to get permission from the government or institutions. They can make a horror movie and find an audience outside of Mexico. And that's easy to say, you know, but when you're a horror fan, you can get other horror fans like you in other places. And I think that's the case of this specific movie. So I feel really lucky and honored to be part of that.
All right. Well, I want to thank you very much for making some time to talk to me.
But I want to thank you so much for believing me and support me, and to be the first person who say, hey, that thing that you're doing, it really has some value. And you show me that what I have in my mind, it could work for somebody else. And I wouldn't be here. And I know I always say that, but I say right now that I'm really like starting to finally have like a little bit of something, you know, in this industry. That yeah, is still in my heart what you did. I have my first official screening with you, my first press note with you, my first real audience with you, and so many firsts with you. And I know what you did to me in my career. I know for a fact that you have done the same to other filmmakers. And other filmmakers that are doing stuff in Hollywood and right now. So I'm really emotional about it to be here with you. So, Bet, muchas gracias for all the independent filmmakers and for believe. You're the first person who believe in a Tijuana filmmaker. You don't know, but you changed the whole culture in Tijuana, because I became, thanks to you, I became something as a filmmaker in Tijuana, and other filmmakers, they were inspired by that, and that was thanks to you. So muchas gracias, Bet.
Well, I don't know if I can claim any responsibility for that, but it makes me very happy to think that you feel that way. You had the talent. It would have come out eventually. I was just fortunate to be in the right place at the right time.
For me, this day is very special.
Well, thank you very much.
No, thank you, Bet. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another edition of the member-supported KPBS Cinema Junkie podcast. That was Tijuana filmmaker Aaron Soto talking about Mexploitation cinema. Horrible Imaginings and the Film Geeks San Diego will be hosting a series of Mexploitation cinema next year at the Digital Gym Cinema, so keep a lookout for that. Next week, I speak with Adam Nimoy about his new documentary about his dad and Leonard Nimoy's most famous creation, Spock, on the original Star Trek series. And remember, I'll be featuring the horror authors of Horrible Imaginings Film Festival in Podcast 93 to kick off a month of horror in October. Please check out the Cinema Junkie podcast on iTunes and leave a review, or visit the archives at kpbs.org/junkiepodcast. I'd also love to have you follow me on Twitter at Cinebeth and like the Cinema Junkie page on Facebook. So till our next Film Fix, I'm Beth Accomando, your resident Cinema Junkie.
KPBS On Demand is supported by Splatero, helping homeowners pay for home improvements by offering streamlined access to your home's equity with no additional monthly payments or new debt. Splatero provides a lump sum payment in exchange for a share of your home's future value. Pre-qualification available at splatero.com.